We have a TV upstairs in our upstairs living room, and I have a couch there and everything. I have a little area set up.
Yeah.
But very rarely do we actually use the TV up there because we just spend our time in the basement like little gamers. But today I was like, it's so cold and crisp. I was like, today's a cozy day. So I lit a candle. I updated the PS4 that we have we had to blow the dust off of. And then me and Buffy basically hung out on the couch and worked on little things and did stuff. And I had a cozy scene on the TV and soft jazz piano. And I was like,
Ooh.
hell yeah, because it is minus a billion and I needed the cozy vibes.
That was me today. And especially when I'm researching and writing, there's something about just having really relaxing. I listen to a lot of lo-fi music when I write. The music, I had Mango running around on the ledge in the studio. He's having a good time. I'm having a good time. It's a vibe. And honestly, I love it.
Me too. I love a cozy vibe. I'm someone that if I'm sitting around doing nothing, my brain's like, what are you doing?
Yes.
You should be doing something.
Oh, yes.
So to me, to take the time to actually sit and be cozy and relax and kind of have a self-care moment, have your cup of tea, have whatever you need and force yourself to relax a little bit. It's kind of nice.
That's valuable.
Yeah, it really is. And you know what? You guys out there can hold on to that going into 2025.
Cozy vibes.
Cozy vibes.
They're important. This episode will be nothing but.
I know. I mean, we're still talking about sort of a Christmas event, but
Yeah.
it doesn't have much of the spirit of joy that Christmas is supposed to bring.
And this is one of those episodes and series where I talk about it a lot, that I really appreciate closure.
Yes.
And when you have a topic where there is no closure and there may never be closure, it sucks.
You're sort of left hanging on that hook in limbo sort of thing.
Yeah.
But we've talked about it. I know that John Ramsey is getting older. By no means is he a spring chicken, but I do have hope that this will be solved within our lifetimes. I think.
Genuinely do too. And I mean, think about it. In the last few years, we've seen The Boy in the Box. We've identified him, The Lady of the Dunes. We've seen these mysteries that have been captivating people for decades that finally have an answer.
Yeah.
And to me, that really does give that hope of one day we will know who actually committed these crimes. And I hold on to that.
Me too, especially because just like us, there's a lot of eyes on this case, and there have been since it happened, honestly. It hasn't really stopped. But all that to say, hello everyone, I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Dina. Welcome to the Grim Curriculum.
So yes, we are on part 2 of our JonBenét Ramsey series. So get ready to bring out your corkboard and red string, because today we are discussing some of the potential suspects in this case.
Over the years, there have been many people who have been thought to be responsible for this horrendous crime. Some have just had a fair bit of evidence against them, while others have fully confessed. Despite that, we still don't know who is responsible for her death.
So today, we will be discussing some of the more popular theories.
The thing with this case is that it brings up a lot of emotions.
Oh, yeah.
I think people really want to see someone held responsible. And because of that, a lot of people have very strong feelings when it comes to who it could have been. People are very much like, he did it, he did it, he did it. You can't convince me otherwise. There's a lot of emotion behind it.
Yeah, I think I mentioned it before. I think this is one of the cases where it's a bit like the Menendez brothers, where you're going to have the people who made up their mind back then when it happened and will not change their mind even if somebody else is found to be the person. You're going to have the people who are maybe a little more like us, that are very open-minded but just want to find out who it is. And then there are the people who maybe think that the answer will never be found.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're going to go over some of the more probable theories, and then at the end, we will share our own thoughts, as always.
With that, we invite you to share your own beliefs at the end of the episode. Send them to thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com. I know you have a lot of emotions, a lot of feelings, a lot of thoughts about this, so let us know.
Our first series of suspects we're going to be covering is, of course, the Ramsey family themselves. Like we mentioned last week, both the media and law enforcement closely focused on this theory from the very beginning.
Despite what you may think, it does make sense that the police would focus on those who were in the house with her the day that she died. After all, you are statistically more likely to be murdered by someone you know rather than a stranger.
Initially, Patsy and John were the exclusive focus. Eventually, even her brother Burke, who was only 9 years old at the time, became a suspect.
And fine print, we do want to remind you all that all 3 members of the family have since been officially cleared by law enforcement.
So just keep that in mind.
Very important.
We will begin with Patsy, though.
The main theory that people had when it came to her was that JonBenét had been struggling with bedwetting. Former housekeeper Linda Hoffman Pugh stated that Patsy had a temper. From there, the accusations grew. People speculated that during that night, JonBenét had wet the bed, which caused Patsy to become angry with her, and in a fit of anger, JonBenét was killed.
The garrote was fashioned from a paintbrush that was owned by Patsy, which only fueled the fire.
The main thing that caused people to think that it may have been Patsy was, of course, the ransom note.
The note itself was suspicious from the start. It was longer than the average ransom note by hundreds of words. The way it was written also came off as strange, causing many to think that it had been written by someone who probably watched too many crime movies rather than an actual seasoned criminal.
Boulder PD's co-leading investigator at the time, Steve Thomas, speculated that Patsy had written the note in a moment of panic after realizing what she had done.
This theory at first seemed like it may go somewhere because of the handwriting itself. When it was analyzed, similarities were found, but the end result was that it was inconclusive.
Sina Wong, a handwriting expert, wasn't convinced. She spent 3 weeks in the year 2000 analyzing the note and comparing it to 100 examples of Patsy's writing. She found more than 200 similarities between the note and the samples.
So could Patsy Ramsey have killed her daughter in a moment of anger and then penned the letter to try and place the blame on someone else?
There's a lot of theories here because one of the things that they noticed with Patsy's writing was after all of this happened, she changed up her writing a bit.
But I think you kind of would.
I would.
Even if, you weren't the suspect.
Yes.
I think even subconsciously, you would make sure that there is no way that you could possibly be a suspect.
Absolutely.
And therefore, change your handwriting even a little bit.
I think even if she didn't realize she was doing that, that's a possible thing that she could have just done, like you said, subconsciously, where she was like, oh, hey, wait a minute, let's just tweak this a little bit.
Because even so, if someone was like, yes, we know that the murderer was blonde, I think subconsciously you'd be like, oh my God, I need to change that.
Yeah, even if it wasn't you.
Totally, absolutely. The other thing too is, especially these days, I don't believe there's a whole lot of trust in handwriting analysis. There is some places where it's come into play, but it's also a bit like hair sample analysis as well, where sometimes yes, but sometimes very inconclusive.
Absolutely.
So, okay, what about John?
Linda Arndt, the first police officer on the scene, who spent a good period of time with the family, noticed a few strange things. For starters, when she asked John to search the house, the first place that he went was where JonBenét's body was. She allegedly told him to leave her where she was, but he moved the body and placed a blanket on her, which destroyed physical evidence that may have been on her.
Linda Arndt was very vocal about her feelings towards John. In an interview with ABC News, she spoke about how strange it was that the parents ignored the 10 a.m. deadline mentioned in the ransom note.
Another detective on the scene found it strange that John made a call to his pilot to fly the family to Atlanta before he was told he couldn't leave town.
Again, that seems very suspicious, very flee the scene of the crime, but as well, you could think of John thinking of his family, being like, I don't want them near this. I need to get them away from here.
And this was one of their houses. This was home, but it wasn't necessarily home. So
and
I could see why you would want that.
Totally. And they were from Atlanta originally, right? So I think in a very stressful situation that not many people find themselves in, you want that comfort. And that's going to be a home, quote unquote.
And then they tell you, hey, you can't leave the scene of the crime. And you're like, oh, yeah, no, for sure.
Duh, of course. In 1999, a grand jury voted to indict the parents on charges of child abuse resulting in death. But the DA at the time did not sign the indictment. Many sources, including members of the grand jury, have stated that it was not signed due to lack of evidence.
It was around that time that Lou Smith, a homicide detective who had been brought in to solve the case, publicly stated that it seemed to him that the parents were unfairly targeted and it was most likely an intruder who was responsible.
On July 9th, 2008, 2 years after Patsy's death, the Boulder District Attorney cleared the parents of any wrongdoing when it came to their daughter's death. This decision was based on new DNA evidence that did not exist in 1996.
And I have to say, the fact that this happened after Patsy died.
That chaps my ass, because I think she deserved to have lived knowing that, of course, she didn't do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until she'd passed, she died thinking, well, she died with everybody else thinking that she did it, or was at least a big part of it.
It was proven that the new DNA test pointed to an unexplained third party. This DNA had been collected from her fingernails and also left traces on her underwear and her leggings.
The argument there was that the DNA on the clothing was found in such small amounts that it could have possibly come from when the pieces were originally manufactured. What are the chances? You know, every time those items of clothing went through a washing machine, or even from manufacture to being on the store shelf.
Yes, absolutely.
How many hands touched those items?
It was described as nanograms of evidence.
Literally infinitesimally small specks.
Yes.
At like a cellular level. Maybe not quite that close, but pretty damn close. We also want to talk about Burke Ramsey. Another theory is that he killed his sister and that his parents covered it up.
I mentioned this last week, but the Dr. Phil interview, it did not help his case.
No.
Like, despite what you might think of him, the interview rubbed a lot of people the wrong way and only led into the suspicions that he knew something that he wasn't telling us. I think that the interview was probably one of the worst things that he could have done to prove his innocence, because whether you suspect him or not, the Dr. Phil interview did him no favors.
No, just the way he responded to a lot of things. There were times when he responded to questions about his sister with like a big smile on his face, and questions that wouldn't usually elicit that kind of response.
Yeah.
But then people have also argued, you know, that he was awkward. You know, what do you do when you're nervous? Can you really hold that against a person? I don't know.
And the thing about Burke that I really want to point out is when your sister is murdered and you don't know who did it, you're not going to grow up normal. You might. I'm not going to say for sure you're not, but the likelihood that you're going to grow up to be like a fully balanced human being, I'd say is pretty small. So for him to act a little off, it makes sense to me.
Also, maybe Mans is just a weirdo.
Yeah.
Socially awkward, whatever, right?
Absolutely.
Also, very personal questions to be asking someone. He was 9 when it happened. He was not 9 when the interview happened.
No.
He was significantly older, but yeah, did not paint him in a very good light, unfortunately.
The Ramseys, they had a whole PR team and all of that. So whoever on their end, even years later, thought that this was a good idea, not a good idea.
Bad. And some people, I think, they'll believe it was Burke until the end of it.
Yeah.
There's some people that really, really have it out for him, unfortunately. Soon after his interview, CBS aired a documentary called The Case of JonBenét Ramsey. This was a 2-part series that re-examined the evidence with a group of FBI and forensic experts, along with retired profiler Jim Clement and former Scotland Yard behavioral analyst Laura Richards. In this documentary, they strongly lean towards Burke as a suspect without making any actual formal accusations.
We spoke a little bit last week about the pineapple that had been found in his system. That night, Burke had been eating pineapple along with milk and tea. The theory is that JonBenét went downstairs and took some of it, which angered Burke, causing him to pick out a nearby flashlight and hit her over the head with it.
It was also stated that in crime scene photos, an 8.5-inch flashlight would fit the gash in her skull. However, no evidence was ever found on the flashlight.
Those who follow this theory claim that his bizarre behavior before and after points to him as a suspect. He had a history of mental health issues and was known to leave his feces throughout the house. On one occasion, he smeared it on a box of candy that she had gotten for Christmas.
Which, pretty nasty, to be fair.
Not a good sign.
No. Linda Hoffman-Pugh had also reported that on one occasion he had smeared feces on her bedroom walls and bed.
There was also one time where he had gotten mad at her and hit her over the head with a golf club, which left a scar on her face.
So, having heard all this, the public, about Burke, plus the interview, plus all the suspicion around the family, unfortunately, it doomed him in a big way in a lot of the public's eye.
Absolutely.
Really, really targeted this
It
kid.
didn't do him any favors.
When speaking to investigators, he allegedly told them that he felt safe and didn't think an intruder would come back for him. In a CBS crime report, it was stated that this was strange due to the fact that most children would be afraid if someone had killed their sister.
And we say this all the time, you never know how someone's going to react.
Yeah.
In times of duress or extreme stress or whatever. But what they were trying to say here was they interviewed him right after and they were like, well, your sister just got, this ransom letter written. She was killed. Are you scared for your safety? And he was like, no, I think it's fine.
But kids don't always understand
Kids
either.
don't get that, especially like he is 9 at this point. He doesn't understand the severity of the situation. I mean, a 9-year-old is going to understand a lot, but when put through that level of extreme stress, I think for even some adults, your brain is just going to go into survival mode and protect you.
Well, and his parents would have been doing, I would imagine, a pretty, hard job in the sense of protecting him from everything that was going on.
Yeah.
They're not going to go out of their way to scare him. If heaven forbid one of your children had been murdered, you're not going to try and make the other one feel like they're next.
Oh, absolutely. You're going to try to protect them.
Exactly. You're going to tell them, you know what? The police are here. It's okay. They're getting to the bottom. You're safe, right? They're not going to tell a 9-year-old, oh, you be careful because you're going to be next.
Yeah, no, you're going to want them to sleep at night.
Exactly. There's been a lot of cases that we've covered recently where they're so this or that, you can argue it one way or the other. And because of this, that's why we don't have a secure answer in who did this. When Burke was asked how JonBenét died, he did a physical demonstration of someone hitting her with a hammer, and he appeared to show little emotion during this time as well.
Once again, all members of the family were cleared of any involvement. Despite this, many people still believe that they could have somehow been involved.
I think their actions didn't do them a lot of favors. The choices that they made, either on their own behalfs or the PR teams or whatever, the lawyers, didn't do them any favors. I personally don't believe it was one of the members of the family.
I'm with you.
It doesn't make any sense to me.
What I think that did them the largest disservice is the fact that she was in those beauty pageants doomed them from the start. Because
absolutely.
If you're not in that scene, and we've both mentioned we don't agree with that, if you're not a part of that community and if that's not something that you're used to, you see that and you look at it like, who the hell would put their kid in this?
Absolutely. People immediately jumped to child abuse because of this. And I think if the pageants hadn't been a factor, of course, the question is always going to come to mind when a child dies. Parents, child abuse, domestic violence, very much a problem. But I don't think it would have been quite at the forefront of everyone's minds had the pageants not been such a part of it.
Yeah.
We talked about it last week. It pissed, I think, everybody off. But the way they talked about JonBenét herself, to me, was disgusting.
Yes.
What they said about her parents was awful also, but say what you want about the adults in the situation. Adults make choices all the time that are not necessarily good ones. JonBenét was 6 years old. Even if she was in those pageants against her consent, that's not her fault.
No, exactly.
Oh my God. That was very frustrating.
It definitely was. Yeah.
Our next suspect is the housekeeper, Linda Hoffman Pugh, which sounds very much like something from like a murder mystery. I suppose it is in a way.
It is.
The housekeeper. She was very outspoken about her theories on who killed JonBenét. What many don't know is that both her and her husband Mervyn were both suspected at one point.
Mervyn was a handyman, and due to their work in the home, the couple carried a key to their house and were familiar with the layout.
Patsy claimed to investigators that Linda and Mervyn had been struggling financially and had asked for a loan of several $1,000s from them, to which the Ramseys had said no.
The night after the murder, police asked Linda to write the number 118,000 on a piece of paper. They also took her fingerprints and some hair samples.
Linda testified in front of the grand jury for 8 hours and also included a statement against Patsy's behavior before Christmas, which read,
I think she had multiple personalities. She'd be in a good mood and then she'd be cranky. She got into arguments with JonBenét about wearing a dress or about a friend coming over. I had never seen Patsy so upset.
multiple
Here's
personalities.
the thing, and something I read multiple times here was your housekeeper is gonna know everything because they see everything.
Yep.
So for her, in hindsight, I'm sure her seeing these outbursts by Patsy or her disciplining JonBenét or whatever the case may have been after the child was murdered, she went back and was like, oh, I saw this, I saw this, I saw this. That doesn't necessarily mean that Patsy is a murderer, but to her, I'm sure it was a red flag in hindsight.
Oh, absolutely. And to say that she had multiple personalities, she'd be in a good mood and then she'd be cranky,
That's a lot.
it's a lot. Have we not all been in a good mood and then cranky?
We all have.
Especially when you're a mother.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hello. The theory regarding her is that she led JonBenét into the basement in an attempt to trick the Ramseys into leaving money for her ransom.
The same brand of duct tape that was used on JonBenét was also found in their house.
Despite this, all of the evidence against her was circumstantial at best, and Linda and Mervyn were never formally accused of the crime.
Which is fair.
Fair enough. I mean, when you start reading it, it's one of those things where it's like, could add up. And then, like you say, circumstantial at best.
At best, 100%.
The next suspect we want to discuss is Michael Helgoth. Michael was a local electrician who worked at a nearby auto salvage yard. The Ramseys hired a private investigator named Ollie Gray to look into the case. Ollie discovered that Michael had been involved in a property dispute against the Ramseys.
He owned a pair of high-tech boots which matched prints found at the crime scene. Michael also had a stun gun. Detectives determined that JonBenét could have been subdued with one.
Michael's DNA was eventually cleared. However, he ended his own life 2 days after authorities claimed that they were closing in on a suspect.
Ollie Gray alleged that Michael's family had a taped confession of his guilt, but that was never substantiated.
I would like to hear more about this guy for sure.
Yeah, this is a tough one because one thing, and we're going to talk about this later, is when it comes to a lot of these people, they say, oh, the DNA wasn't there. That crime scene was a hot mess.
100% it was. Also, DNA testing in 1996 is not what it is today.
Exactly.
We've already talked about that by the fact that they tested the DNA years after the fact, right? So, yes, the DNA evidence maybe wasn't there, but there could have been other things pointing to it.
Yep.
I don't know. This guy seems a little suspicious, but he's unfortunately not around anymore to argue otherwise.
Yep.
The next is the Santa Claus theory. A retired journalism professor named Bill McReynolds played the part of Santa Claus at the Ramseys' Christmas party. Bill was known to JonBenét and had a strong fondness towards her. During the party, he handed her a note saying that she would receive a special gift after Christmas from him.
Allegedly, he had chosen JonBenét to be what he called his special friend. She had given him a vial of glitter, which he took with him into the operating room when he had heart surgery. He even asked his wife to mix the glitter with his ashes when he died.
This is all really weird, but there isn't a ton of evidence against him other than his really strange behavior.
He said in an interview when he was talking to his wife the day that he met JonBenét, he went to his wife and he said, I think I've just met an angel.
Whoa.
And he had this fondness for her that, once again, hindsight just doesn't look good on paper.
I mean, based on what we've just read so far, borderline creepy at the least.
Yeah, exactly.
Really, really gross at the worst.
Bill's own daughter was abducted on December 26th, 1974, along with a friend. His wife also wrote a play called Hey Rube, which is about the sexual assault, torture, and murder of a young girl whose body was found in a basement a few years later.
After being implicated in the murder, Bill moved out of Colorado. He was never officially charged and passed away in 2002 from a heart attack. Bill, I'm sorry, homie. Not looking good for you.
Made some bad choices, Bill. This is one of those stories that we tell where you can go down any of these roads and be almost completely convinced, like, this could be the person. Oh, no, wait, this could be the person. Oh, no, wait, this could. Because there were so many people associated with this case that were just so sus.
And what are the chances? I mean, yes, they were a very affluent family,
Yes.
obviously, right? Taking private jets is not something that we peons down here on the ground can really relate to. But how is it possible that either A, all these different suspects are obsessed with this child, or B, how did this family piss off so many people? I mean, again,
Yeah.
it can happen when you're rich and powerful and making shady dealings. But just all these, if we had 2 or 3, even 4 suspects,
Yes.
sure,
Okay.
fair enough. But I think there was literally hundreds at one point.
Yeah.
How is that even a thing?
And it only gets worse from here.
Oh my goodness.
A suspect that John Ramsey himself believed could have done it was a local man named Gary Oliva. Gary was one of 38 registered sex offenders living in the area.
Ooh, Boulder, Colorado in 1996.
Bad time.
Oh, geez. You know what, though? If there's that many in Boulder, Colorado in 1996, what does that say for every other city?
They're everywhere.
Oh, Lord have mercy. His name came up early in the investigation when he reportedly came to a friend distraught and told him that he had hurt a little girl. His friend stepped forward with reports against him and said the ties around JonBenét's throat were similar to an incident where he attempted to strangle his own mother with a telephone cord.
He was apprehended on drug charges in the year 2000, and a stun gun was found with his possession.
Detective Smith reported to 48 Hours Investigates that Gary had attended a candlelight vigil for JonBenét on the 1-year anniversary of her death. That's creepy.
Returning to the scene of the crime. That's the thing. We know that happens.
Absolutely.
Gary lived in a tent and frequented buildings in the area along with a church that fed the needy. When police searched his tent, they found photos of JonBenét. He denied killing her, but said he would take credit for the murder if it would give him a roof over his head and 3 meals a day.
He openly admitted to being fascinated with her and the case. His DNA was not matched to the DNA found at the crime scene, and he was ruled out as a suspect.
In 2016, Gary Oliva was charged with child exploitation after he was found possessing CP, and he was released from prison early last year.
Well, I think he one-ups creepy Santa Claus.
It only gets worse from here, my friend.
Now we're on to Randy Simons, and we're fairly sure that the majority of our listeners would agree that, yes, the child beauty pageant scene is incredibly problematic for a slew of reasons. And like I said, this leads us to our next person of interest, Randy Simons.
Randy was a known photographer in the pageant scene. Some mothers were concerned when people who did not have a child competing in the pageants came to watch them on numerous occasions. Simons was singled out due to borderline inappropriate photos he had of children in his studio. So they very carefully specified when talking about him, these were not pornographic images, but they were just on the cusp of like, oh, you shouldn't do that.
If you look at something and it makes you uncomfortable immediately, it has crossed a line.
They were like very, very early 2000s American Apparel ads.
Oh,
you know what I mean?
Yep, absolutely. But pageants are one of those scenes that are going to attract a certain kind of predator based on a certain kind of victim, i.e.,
of course
children,
they are.
right?
And if you don't have a kid in the pageant, what are you doing there?
Absolutely. That's like going to see like a kids movie by yourself as a 40-year-old man. What are you doing? Don't do that.
There's some Disney men out there.
Let's not get into the Disney adults.
Look.
Randy also caught the attention of many when he continued to sell photos of JonBenét to agencies after her death. That should be illegal.
Not a good look, Randy. It also really didn't help his case when he called the mothers of many of his clients, insisting that he didn't kill JonBenét, despite the fact that no one had actually considered him a suspect until then.
Classic case of, hey, don't worry, I'm not going to kill you. Well, I wasn't worried until you said that. In 1998, he was arrested and placed under a psychiatric hold. He was also seen walking naked in public. At the time of his arrest, he continued to tell police he had nothing to do with JonBenét's murder.
So he's literally walking around naked in public and being like, I didn't kill JonBenét, I didn't kill JonBenét. And this is a couple
2 years
later.
after the fact. Again, wouldn't have thought twice about it, but since you mentioned it.
Yeah, exactly. In 2019, Randy Simons was arrested for downloading CP while in a restaurant. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and that is where he currently is.
Again, what are the chances that all these people involved in this case are absolute creep shows?
That's what makes this case so difficult to comprehend is these people separately all make sense.
Yes. But to have them all together sort of operating at the same time with the same person, i.e. JonBenét, that's insane. But maybe it is because of the pageants in the sense that she had her face out there. Her father had done, a whole float for a parade with her name and everything on it. So perhaps predators that would not have been aware of her previously became aware of her, unfortunately, and that's incredibly sad.
Our last person of interest is probably one of the most complicated.
From 2002 to 2006, a man only known as Daxis corresponded in both emails and phone calls with journalism professor Michael Tracy. He claimed he had sexually abused JonBenét more than once before ultimately killing her.
At first, Michael Tracy was skeptical of these claims. However, Daxis revealed facts about the case that were never released to the public. He eventually threatened to go to the Ramseys himself, so Michael Tracy connected him with the then DA for Boulder.
Michael Tracy began working with investigators and recorded phone calls with Daxis where he gave gruesome details about abusing JonBenét. He also said that he had used what he called a quote-unquote special necklace for erotic asphyxiation. Ugh, so gross. Ugh.
Yep. Daxis claimed that he was sexually assaulting her and accidentally choked her to the point of being brain dead. He then took a piece of tape from his flashlight and pulled it over her mouth. Then he covered her with the blanket and bludgeoned her with the flashlight. He spoke of this in great detail, but did not specifically say that he killed her.
He then requested to speak with Patsy, who was near the end of her life. He stated that he wanted to apologize. Investigators set up a tapped phone at her bedside and waited for the call. It never came.
This piece of garbage, literally, she is on her deathbed. On her deathbed with the glimmer of hope that she might find out who killed her daughter.
And that he's going to apologize for it.
And he just doesn't call.
If he truly had nothing to do with this and still went through all of this anyway and basically tortured Patsy at the end of her life, fuck you, bro.
I don't know what's worse.
Honestly.
I don't know if it's worse that he did do it and he didn't call or that he didn't do it and he was just teasing her with this.
What a piece of shit. In an effort to find out his real and actual identity, Michael Tracy offered him the last original printed photo of JonBenét, and he agreed to pick it up from a UPS store in Bangkok. In Bangkok?
He was in Bangkok.
Really?
We'll talk about this in a second. Yep.
I thought I was like, am I Bangkok? Like, I'm not thinking of somewhere else. And
You're
just
like the Bangkok?
So when he picked up the photo, it was revealed that he was working as a substitute teacher whose real name was John Mark Carr.
John Mark Carr had been arrested for possession of CP in 2001, and he left the country before he could be sentenced.
John Mark Carr was extradited to Boulder and arrested after he confessed to the murder. Unfortunately, the entire case collapsed due to lack of evidence. His DNA did not match what was found at the crime scene, and his family said that he was home with them when JonBenét was killed.
Despite this, many believe that he is the real killer. Several people close to the case believe that his DNA was not found due to how contaminated the crime scene was.
An attorney for the Ramsey family claimed that he once lived near the home. John Ramsey also stated that his housekeeper in Michigan said that she was 100% certain that he was in their home at one point asking questions. John Mark Carr has denied this.
As of May of 2024, John Mark Carr has relocated outside of the US once again and has not been charged with any more crimes against children.
Again, how is it that all these people seem to point at the right place?
This isn't like other cases where it's like, oh, this guy could have done it. There's just not enough evidence.
Yes.
It's like this guy or this guy or this guy or this guy. It is so utterly complicated. And once again, with the fact that the crime scene was so poorly handled, that really complicates things in a lot of ways, because how can you say that someone's DNA was or wasn't at the crime scene when people were stomping in and out of there for a long time before it was sealed off?
Absolutely. People really gave John Ramsey a very hard time because he picked up and moved JonBenét when he found her.
Yeah.
But as I said before, if you're a parent and you've just found your child like that, after going through everything else they had gone through, the ransom, the police, all of that, and then you find her, there's not a person on earth that wouldn't pick her up and move her out of the way, right? There are so many times when we as human beings are affected by something called the bystander effect.
Yes.
Where you see something happen and no one does anything, right? And so there are times when people have like actively like bled to death because no one stepped in and did anything because they froze. What if in that moment, JonBenét had still been alive and John Ramsey did nothing? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't think you can hold it against him for picking her up and removing her from the crime scene, but the cops were rookies and it was incredibly poorly handled in that case, right? You had all these people in and out of the house. You had people that cleaned up the crime scene in the sense that they cleaned up the kitchen while all of this was happening, right? So evidence that may have been there was either destroyed or removed altogether. What a clusterfuck.
I'm glad that you said that, because the bottom line is that when it comes to a moment of sheer heartbreak and panic, you cannot expect the parents to react properly.
No.
However, you should expect law enforcement to react properly. And we did not get that in this case. And if anyone is to blame, it is law enforcement. You cannot blame the parents for reacting the quote unquote wrong way to all of this, or calling the PR team, calling the wrong lawyers, whatever the case may be. But there is a protocol that needs to be followed.
Yes.
And because none of that was followed, that's why years and decades now after the fact, we still don't have an answer, because there was so much of a mess when it came to the DNA. And if anything ever stops us from finding out the truth, it's going to be that. I still hold out hope. I think that, like you said, within our lifetimes, I think we will find out who it was. I genuinely hope so. And I hope it is before John dies.
Me too.
Because he deserves to know.
And you never know who we might get a deathbed confession out of. Some of the suspects, obviously, like we mentioned, are not with us anymore for one reason or another. But for all we know, John Mark Carr, while he is in a different country, probably doing his absolute best to stay out of the spotlight, given his history, we may get a deathbed confession from him, or perhaps a member of his family or something as well.
I always hate to throw it down to image, but have you seen what this guy looks like?
No, I don't think so.
I'm going to show you.
Maybe briefly in like the documentaries and stuff, but I don't think I've particularly focused on him.
No, dude, you got to see this.
Why do they always have triple-barreled names too?
I know.
I don't know if that's just the way we talk about serial killers and bad people. We always include like the middle name. But why? Why is that a thing? Ooh. He looks like a piece of work.
Hey, Triana, I'm going to show you guys, those of you who are watching, on the phone.
I mean, for a substitute teacher, I don't know if I would. I mean, it's all obviously clear as day now. I wouldn't trust him to look over my kids, but
he's just a scary looking dude. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know, because we talk about it all the time where someone wants the notoriety of committing these crimes without actually having done them. So it could be that, but I don't know. And again, there is no closure here.
No, even if you think, for example, that it was Creepy Santa, well, unfortunately, like I said, Creepy Santa is not here to defend himself. So Let us know what you guys think. I still don't really know. I know some people really like to have someone picked out and they're like, nope, that is the one. We're going to stick with that until we hear better. But these guys are all so compelling individually. Yep. It could have been any one of them. In fact, there are so many child predators on this list that I would assume they were working together. But they're not. They didn't snitch on each other. No one mentioned it. There was no connection between any of these people.
I think the real grim thing about this case
yes,
is that it proves that there are monsters everywhere.
Absolutely. It doesn't matter how educated a person is, if they're working with kids, if they're working with animals, if they're working with the public. You can't trust anyone 100%. And that is a truly unfortunate thing.
It is.
And I don't mean to scare you. I don't mean to fearmonger. But keep your wits about you guys.
Absolutely. If you think that there's someone that we missed or details that we missed, please email us at thegrimcurriculum@gmail.com. If there is a suspect that you lean to, let us know who it is and let us know why. Because I want to know people's opinions when it comes to this. Because I'm at a point, and I feel like you're at the same point too, where I don't know.
It also made me think back to, Richard Ramirez and things like that. Not only did this person murder this poor little girl, they did it in her house where her family was sleeping. That takes a fucked up individual. People break into houses not knowing what's going on inside means that they have a screw loose upstairs.
Absolutely.
Because you never truly know what's waiting for you.
No.
And to brazenly walk into that little girl's room and do what you did and get away with it? Insanity. So I suppose that concludes our list of potential suspects.
I'm heated up.
It comes to this case. Me too, actually. And like Dina says, if you think there's someone we missed or any specific details that point you towards one person or another, please let us know. We're now at the part of the episode where we, of course, give a big shout out to our friends and fam over on Patreon.
Let's talk about something positive, please.
Yes.
You guys are amazing. As you all know, if you want to see video episodes, you can check those out on Patreon. We do early episode reveals for the free tiers. We got Discord. We got all sorts of fun stuff. So check it out. Patreon.com/thegrimcurriculum. I want to say a huge thank you to Atlantean Jedi, Bob, Carrie, Judy, Nova, Lisa, Maya Mudkip, Paranoid Pop Rocks, and Steven Centauri.
Woo! Thank you so much. And you know what? It's funny that you mentioned that Patreon is where you can see our faces during all of this. We had a comment on our YouTube very recently that was like, this is just a podcast.
Yeah,
guys, it is just a podcast. But if you do
crack the case.
I don't know what to tell you, Captain Obvious. You've cracked it. But if you do want to see our faces, Patreon is the place to see us. We do post little clips on the reels and the YouTube shorts and the TikTokies and all that good stuff. But yeah, Patreon's the place to be if you wanna look at us, you weirdos.
Throw us up on the TV.
Alrighty.
Thank you all for listening. This has been
The Grim Curriculum.
I learned something new today.
Lovely.
Surgeons who play video games for at least 3 hours a week perform 27% faster and make 37 fewer mistakes when they're performing laparoscopic surgery.
That is amazing. And as a little gamer myself, and you too, that makes me very happy.
Me too.
I like to hear positive things about the video games.
Bye.
Bye.